Hi, it's Simon from Velovision here, and I'm joined today by Mike Burrows. We're just going to have a little chat about Mike's life in cycling. So first of all, do you mind sort of just explaining how it is you first sort of walked into cycling?
The car blew up, basically. I used to have a Mark 1 Cortina GT-ish sort of thing, a bit hacked about, and done some tweaks to it, whatever, so they're going to gudgeon pin retaining circuit came loose and wore down the board, whatever. Anyway, the car was off the road and I had to borrow the wife's bike to go to work on. And it was like really good. It was sort of coming out of the factory at the end of a hard day with a row with the foreman, and suddenly you weren't stuck in a traffic jam, you were just sort of whizzing off down the road on a bicycle, albeit bike. Sorry, bike. And I thought, this is sort of quite nice. And luckily by then I'm working with a guy who was a keen cyclist, Paul Denny. He sort of drop in to see him and chat, whatever, and he went everywhere on the bicycle, the whole family did, whatever sort of thing. So we got chatting and he said, well, why don't you just keep on doing it? What? Well, cycling to work, you can get a decent bike and keep cycling to work. Oh yeah, I could do that, couldn't I? Sure enough, so I bought what I wouldn't be seen dead riding today, a Rally Carlton 5-speed racing bike, whatever, and that was it. I was away. I was a cyclist. The wife then became a cyclist. We had a son who became a cyclist. He got shoved on the back of that bike. And my friend Paul, who'd made his own bicycle frames out of 531 tubing, which I at the time was starting to read cycling magazines, and this must be some dark art involving sort of, frogs and toads and whatever sort of thing. And he said, no, it's engineering. You're an engineer. You can braze, can't you? Well, yeah, I've done a lot of brazing. So I made my own first 531 frame, straight touring bike, copied off the Rally job. Didn't know geometry in those days, and yeah, that worked fine, whatever sort of thing. And just increment by increment, I obviously joined the CTC. And then it had a sort of a racing offshoot as well. A friend of mine had written a time trial, and I'd never been sporting in all my life. I was the one at school who got out of football or anything. I never ran, didn't do anything, whatever. I thought, I don't know, give it a try. And I rode an evening 10 on this bike, took the mudguards and rack off and raced up and down the road. 27:05, my first ever time, you never forget it. And that was it, I was hooked. I don't know why, I quite enjoyed, hurting myself, that sort of thing. So that carried on, and then fine, okay, I'm racing, I better have a racing bike. So then, and I bumped into another person, a young Mr. Andrew Pegg, who came on board because of the other side of cycling, the laid-back world, which is, of course, there was a parallel dimension really. And I copied his bike and made a 531 lightweight race or whatever sort of thing, and then moved on from that, and then he showed me some of the silly things that he had made over the years, and finally it clicked on me that you didn't have to just follow convention in cycling. I'd been an aero modeller in my youth, and aero modelers design and build anything they like, because they're not in it, so it doesn't matter if it crashes if you don't get hurt, sort of thing. And you just experiment all sorts of things, and the world of cycling didn't do experimenting, I thought, but suddenly, well, maybe it does, and this was in the early 80s. And things were starting to happen. The East Germans had made the sloping top tube bikes and the funny handlebars and things, and I actually ended up making one of those almost as a caricature. But by then, of course, this parallel world had started. The first speed trials had been held at Brighton for the human-powered vehicles. And we got along to look at that, and we thought, hey, this does look fun. Suddenly this has opened up the world of cycling to a whole range of new dimensions and ideas. So, say, the gang of us, we roped in Andy, who was going to be the rider because he was our top local time trialist, and built that first straight line machine, which of course we're going to see later. I'm back doing the same again, whatever. And although the two sides never mixed, the HPV world and the cycling world was very much two dimensions, two groups of people, whatever sort of thing. Obviously the design processes, because I was designing an HPV to go as fast as possible, and it was nothing to do with fag paper clearances or weight or anything. It was about aerodynamics, which I knew from aero modelling. Well, right, why aren't I thinking like that when I design bicycles? I thought, and so I then designed a bicycle still using steel tubing for the frame, but by making that as small as possible, and the bits that stuck out the handlebars and seat posts were then streamlined, aeroplane wings as it were. Suddenly I'd made an aerodynamic bicycle. Then one of my friends, Simon, who'd started building bikes and HPVs, same as I had up in North Norfolk. He got hold of carbon fibre, and this is the early 80s. Now, carbon fibre, you read about it. Rolls-Royce used it, Ford's had it on GT40s. There was no carbon fibre in the real world, but because he had aerospace connections through his father, he got enough carbon fibre to make a whole shell, a whole fairing of an HPV, and it was incredible. It was so strong and light. And I always tell people it's like picking up your first piece of honeycomb board. It's, wow, this is amazing. What can I do with it? I think, well, in case of honeycomb board, not much, but in case of carbon fibre, anything you can think of you can make with carbon fibre, because it's so totally universal. Any shape you can imagine you can make. Now, Simon was building an HPV, and at the time I was off HPV and on bike because I'd just done the new, and I suddenly dawned on me, I'm riding a 16-inch bicycle. This was this little tiny frame bicycle rather than the 23-inch which I'd normally ride with the long narrow seat post. Maybe if I just filled it in and made it solid, I understood the principle of monocoque, aeroplanes are monocoques, of course, whatever, and I understand it would be aerodynamic, so if I mould just this streamlined skin, as everyone now knows what it looks like, sort of thing, but nobody did then. And that was that. Now, that was 82. Took out a registration with the patent office and all of that sort of stuff, whatever, and no one took any notice. I was taking it around bike shows and they were looking blankly at it or saying, well, why have you covered the tubes over? I haven't actually covered any tubes over. It's a tube of the shape of a bicycle, you stupid whatever sort of thing. So I just almost forgot that whole side because they were so bloody stupid. And I know what I'd done, whatever. I made the best bike in the world. But if you're right and everyone who runs things is wrong, it gets you nowhere. So fine, I'll go back to racing HPVs, which was much more fun. And of course that carried on, and that led to the Speedy, the first road going recumbent tricycle, and that was just incredible fun, and the whole new range of dimensions came out of that. And then that just more or less gave up on the cycling side because we formed the British Human Power Club, 83 of course, and suddenly there were a group of people who thought just like I did and I could go racing with them, and that was an awful lot more fun, and because I was a good designer I could win races even doing that, which in the cycling world I was never going to win a bicycle race, however good my bikes were, but once you streamlined and the fed speedies and that, we won world championships and all sorts, so that was really nice. Then the famous bit, the 15 minutes of fame, where a friend of mine, Rudy Toman, who worked at Lotus, who were just down the road of course, saw the early monocoque hanging on the wall sort of thing and said, well, what's that? I said, wait, it's my monocoque bike, but no one's interested, so I wasn't bothered. Well, can I take it to show them at work? Lotus. Well, I suppose so. sort of thing. Never thought to Lotus, they make my heroes in the old days, used to do motors, but no, they said they understood what it was, and suddenly I was working with a group of people who understood the materials, the technology, the aerodynamics, and it was absolutely fabulous. And obviously we got Chris involved, and the rest is history, and made 15 minutes of fame sort of thing, and that was nice. And then that all fell flat. British Cycling hated my guts because the bicycle got mentioned on the front page and the back page and the middle page, and no, Chris could have won on a butcher's bike. They were saying, no, he couldn't. He couldn't have won without my bicycle. For Christ's sake, it was a very good bike. No, the industry didn't want it. I mean, a few got copied, not very well. Governing body banned it, and nobody even batted an eyelid. But out of all of that, the curious thing is the good guys, if everyone makes a movie, the good guys came out on top. Chris got the best paid job ever, a British pro in his day, of course, first gold medal in donkey's years, whatever. Rudy left Lotus and went to work for Mavic back in France. He was trained anyway, whatever, suited him, working on Olympic stuff, whatever. And I got a job with Giant, working world's biggest bike maker for 7 years, globe trotting, and ending up designing Compact Road, the bike that sort of did change the shape of road, which was very influential. And that was just all going very nicely, but then 7 years with Giant, the governing body were banning everything, and I was getting frustrated. So, I've had enough of it. I'm getting old actually, flying around the world, all it's cracked up to be. Came back here to earn a living making recumbents. By then the whole recumbent movement, while I'd been away, had grown immensely. Whenever the Dutch had taken over, become the centre of the universe. Bikes and more or less replaced tricycles was the mainstream, whatever. So I started making the rat catcher bike, thinking I would earn a living making those. But of course, by then there were so many readily available commercial models, whereas in the days of the Speedy, everybody came to see me. By now they didn't have to, so that never really worked out. But then the 8 came along, and that was a nice little earner for a while. That was unique again in its day, whatever sort of thing. And again, the movement sort of, just stabilised, I suppose, today. We're not growing as a movement, sadly, whatever, which is a shame because there's a lot more potential to recumbents than just going fast. I mean, obviously what they do really well is go long distance touring and stuff like that. They're excellent, whatever. And to be fair, the CTC, if you go to the Alt Rally, there's more recumbents there than any of our race meetings, so there are people who appreciate their potential. The club scene has moved on to all on low races. You'll see that later. They go very fast and are very exciting to ride, whatever sort of thing. And that's sort of where it is now. It's all stabilised. I'm semi-retired now, so I don't have to sort of work my butt off, whatever sort of thing, and whatever. So yeah, we're sort of just ticking over, doing our thing. But I say it's come full circle because I'm now working on what I started working on, a pure straight line speed machine. I now have the intelligence to let someone else do the aerodynamics. Aerodynamics these days involves computers. I mean, you can't just draw a nice shape anymore. It's very technical. Thankfully, you can still design chassis. I've still got enough intuition and experience that I can handle what goes inside the shape, as it were. So Glenn and I at London South Bank are working on this project, and with any luck, I'm going to have a go at the British Air record with the machine as a test run, as it were, because I know how to ride recumbents, and we'll then know what the potential for the machine is. Because once you get a bright young thing from the mainstream cycling world, you're not sure how hard he's trying, as it were, because he's in a whole new environment for himself. So we've got a reference point. Once we shove him inside his streamlined glass coffin sort of thing, we'll know if he's trying or not, because if he can't beat me, he's not trying. So that's where we stand. So hopefully by the end of this year, we'll have a record or two under our belts and see where we go.
And then for those who are sort of new to the world of Mike Burrows and the Chris Boardman, could you just explain a little bit about what it was that made that bike so special and stand out, and how that contributed? Because the world today, obviously, we talk about things like marginal gains for British cycling, and it's all focused very much on what you can get out of a rider, that little bit more. But obviously, in the past, it's historically been far more about the bike. So,
well, it hasn't, because I was the last time it was about the bike was in 1885 when Jamie Sully demonstrated young J.K. Starley, the VC were having a go at me, demonstrated how fast a safety bicycle went, and no one has held their bicycle up since 1885. They really haven't, sort of thing, until 92. And its advantage was its aerodynamics. I mean, marginal gains are all very well, but I much prefer a big one. Okay, if all you can do is marginal, fine, but it's much better to go for the big improvements. And its aerodynamic advantage was enormous. Now, it was at the end of the day, it was enormously good aerodynamically, but of course it's only a small part of the equation. The rider is still the least aerodynamic object. The wind tunnel work we did with Chris and the bike with Lotus and Myra, that allowed us to get Chris's aerodynamic position even better than it was already, sort of thing, so that added to it. And there's the psychological one, which we didn't talk about at the time, but the fact that Chris, having sat on that bike in the wind tunnel, knew what the numbers were. He knew he had the fastest bicycle in the world, and that's worth a lot. When whatever the guy he was up against had thrashed him last time out, but he hadn't had that bike then. So he was no longer cowed by the big German. He knew, watch it, mate, this is it. He knew what he had. So that all adds up. So we had that combination of factors. Chris was absolutely on top of his game. His training was at his best. Mentally, he was just there to win, and he knew nothing else was going to happen. But it was the bike. It was the aerodynamics, the airflow over that smooth shape. Diamond frames, the modern diamond frames, they can be better than they were, but they're mostly not. I mean, modern bicycles are just garbage. They've got square tubing and all sorts of crap on them. Even British squad bikes are nothing at all. I mean, they're ordinary, whatever, so to be fair, the best you can say about them. And they don't seem interested in anything else. They don't seem to understand it. Actually, it's their job is selling bicycles. We talked about this earlier. Yeah, that's the reason we run bicycle races, is to promote cycling, and that means selling bicycles. If you don't hold the bicycle up afterwards, it's not much use to people. And they're not terribly good. They're very, very disorderly bike. But what they have developed is, we're talking about the marginal gain. That's in training. That's moved on in leaps and bounds. It's not something I've ever taken seriously. But I had my power measured the other day and started sort of take more than a passing interest, and started reading up a bit. And potentially, even at my age, you can actually go quite fast if you're prepared to work very, very hard. That is the downside with it, sort of thing. So they've got that. And interestingly, I haven't had it really confirmed, but I'm fairly certain what they're now doing is they're improving the aerodynamics of the rider. Now, the rider is the big bit on the bicycle, as long as you're not lying down like I sensibly do mostly, and you're a bad shape Now, if you're a bad shape, you don't want to be basically, you do want to be smooth, but it gets complicated. You want to trip the airflow at a certain point, and everyone quotes the dimples in golf balls, and find dimples do well for golf balls. But if you're not a golf ball, you don't want dimples, okay? You don't want dimples in your helmet or in your rim or anywhere else for that matter, because you don't spin round and men aren't going to hit you with the big sticks, sort of thing. Basically, you want a little tripwire, just the right place, because air won't flow round the back of something that's not streamlined. It can't close up, it swirls off the back. You know, see the back of a lorry going down the motorway on a wet day. It needs to come gently. And if it can't flow round the back, you need to make it, roughen it up very slightly just before it gets to that point. I mean, it's simple and technical at the same time, but basically you need to trip the airflow up just before the maximum width of whatever the object is. So, and if you look at some of the skin suits, you'll find there are seams in the skin suits in just the right place to disturb the airflow to get it, and that then flows further around the back before it breaks away. And they're wearing long socks. I saw it. Why are we wearing long socks? People don't wear socks in cycling, for Christ's sake. And of course, the socks have got turbulator strips down the front. And there's even been talk of hair implants that you could shave your leg in just the right place and have the little airflow. I've always run hairy legs, so I've got turbulation naturally, sort of thing. And of course, if you're the big bit and you're most of the drag, and you can reduce the drag on all those bits, then you can improve. And I suggest an awful lot of the track performance is down to that understanding. But what I'm again seeing, or I think I'm seeing, is the people who are now selling the skin suits to cash in on this. They're as stupid as the helmets with the dimples in, sort of thing. You know? So they're not doing any good. There's only one or two people who actually know what they're actually doing there. But they're still riding rubbish bikes. They could still go faster if they had the more aerodynamic monocoque bicycle with a monoblade. They had the single-sided monoblade. And this is the one thing that cyclists really can't get their head around at all, the monoblade principle. And this is despite the fact that they've got monoblades. Every bicycle has two monoblades. They call them cranks. They're on one side, they stick out, and you stand on the end of them. You know, it's just not a problem. You know, the moment they see the wheel on one leg. So monoblades, again, they are the way forward. They're better for it, especially with disc brakes. Disc brakes and monoblades just lend themselves to each other, whatever sort of thing, you know, a natural thing. But they're non-intuitive. You need someone to sort of really take a lead. Curiously, you know, Chris won with the monoblade on. It didn't catch on even then. It was a bit radical. And even Cannondale do the lefty, which is, you know, inspired by some of my early designs, shall we say, being polite to them. Even that hasn't really caught on, despite the fact that it is very good. It works incredibly well. They've done a lovely job there. Sort of thing, you know. But no, so the cycling world is naturally conservative. It needs a bit of a shake-up, and it's just not getting it, as it were, sort of thing. And the laid-back world is still is a parallel dimension. It really is. It's not influencing mainstream cycling, sort of thing. But fine, basically we don't care. We know what we're doing. You know, I'm building a bike that, with any luck, will do 90 mile an hour, sort of thing. That's it. We are in a league of our own, sort of.
The first sort of big venture you had into bike design yourself was the Speedy, is that correct, in terms of sort of commercial success?
That was because again I came up with the idea as a training machine, you know, literally as a trainer for the original machine, and I don't think anyone ever trained it. It was just too much fun, you know. Parties, it's really good at parties. People are getting drunk and going out and racing around in Speed, especially on snow, was absolutely fabulous. It made it, sort of thing. So I started making them for friends and selling them, and because there was nothing else. It was the world's first commercially available recumbent tricycle, sort of thing, and that's it. So I could sell as many as I could make, whatever sort of thing, and it's still in production nominally, whatever sort of thing. So that was rather nice. But again, that wasn't ever going to make me a million. I never wanted to make a million, whatever sort of thing. So I never made any great plans for it, whatever sort of thing. It was that thing. And again, it was a sideline. I was building these packaging machines, packing money. So I was making lots of money out of money. I think so. It never became more than a hobby. And I say later attempts. The 8-freight was the only other commercial one. That's made over 100 of those and sold them. They're made in Taiwan, but that was a nice little project, whatever sort of thing. And again, just I've sold a few rat races and a few rat catches, and that's it, whatever.
And then with Giant, you went and worked with them for 7 years. And what was the bike you sort of the one that really changed the world that you mentioned earlier?
Well, it's a TCR compact road. Basically, the Giant, quick structure, they're Taiwanese. They're based in Taiwan. There's all Taiwanese money, whatever sort of thing. But they understood that to get out into the world, they need local knowledge. So they set up this sort of global structure of divisions around the world: USA, Europe. Europe is based in the Netherlands, and all the other European countries are sub to Giant Europe, whatever. So basically, Giant Europe will knock heads together within Europe, because Taiwan would like to make one bike in one size and one colour. There's a production, that's an ideal thing. Everyone in Europe wants their own bicycle, so Giant Europe was there to coordinate, bang heads together, get the minimum. They would then go to Taiwan, and they would haggle. It's really, really dynamic structure. So Giant Europe would haggle with Taiwan over prices and structure and colours and everything, whatever, and then get the bikes shipped out from Taiwan. And they were the ones who spotted the fact that Taiwan's price point was going up and up as the country was growing incredibly fast, and of course whatever sort of thing, and they'd got in the early age purely on price. They were half the price of everything else and the same quality, and that's fine. But they were losing that, so they needed to raise the game, whatever, so they needed an image, and there I was available. They'd seen my signature on one of the Aubry bikes that we did with the Vega show. Rang me up, and at the same time, of course, they set up the mountain bike team to just raise the whole profile of Giant. So I got the job as designing, come up with radical ideas. So they flew out to Taiwan, saw what they were doing, and curious enough, the first meeting I went to was, I hadn't even got the job then, and they were couple of things. They were trying to give the current road bikes a bit of a lift, to say, because mountain bike was taking over. And they were looking at fancy wheels and things, so I came up with designed the plastic spoke wheel, which worked very nicely for them. There was tri-spokes don't look right on a diamond frame anyway, so it was a nice move there. And I think I'd come up with, they wanted basically a monocoque. They wanted the Harrods bike there, which is the Giant, of course. They wanted something that was the road version of the Lotus bike, as it were. That was what I was sort of scheduled to do. But so they had a problem with production. They were making the moulded lug mountain bikes like Trek, OCLV, but then they only needed 3 sizes, and they were selling lots of mountain bike. Now Europe, say this handling bit, Europe wanted road bikes in that moulded lug construction, which Trek were doing, of course, but they needed 8 or 10 sizes, and they weren't selling much at all. So Taiwan said, no, sod off, we're not going to do that. So you have a dynamic, wonderful structure, whatever, so we're not going to do that. You're not selling enough. We're not going to tool up for all those, for Christ's sake. So it's stupid. So I went away. I don't know. I've got this 16-inch mountain bike hanging up there, which I get on with. I've got my little baby time trial bike, which is 16 inches. Why wouldn't I have a 16-inch road bike? So I contacted Taiwan. I said, look, send me up an old mountain. You've got a 16-inch frame scrap hanging up there. They shipped that over to me, and I built it up as a road bike. And this is the first year of '94 I was with them, and I took it over to have an annual meeting in Lelystad, whatever. Took it over on the plane. Rode into Lelystad with a friend who just found the way from Schiphol through to Lelystad, whatever, never been there. And delivered this bike with this aero seat post and a little baby frame. Oh, they said, what's that? Because nobody had mentioned this. I think, well, it's sort of like a little baby road bike, and you can make 3 sizes, and then that, and you have the long area, you can make the seat posts in different sizes, and so we had several meetings of that, and that's not a bad idea. I mean, curious enough, all the time I worked with Giant myself, they never made it in carbon fibre. We started in aluminium, obviously, welded alley, whatever, and it just clicked. It just worked from day one, sort of thing. We signed the Ante team up, the Spanish agent spotted them, and they just liked the bikes. It wasn't the aerodynamics. They just, this little baby frame, and it just sort of felt right to them. Whatever, the top professional riders in the world suddenly were riding them. Whatever, so that was a really sort of great sort of thing. And that was so. That's the most influential bike I've ever designed. Yet it was the least revolutionary. It was evolutionary rather than revolutionary, whatever. But commercially and influential, that was the one. The one that the revolutionary one that sadly never got made, of course, was the city bike. The idea of the wheels on one side, the structural chain case with the gears inside that, 0 maintenance, monoblade, drum brakes, the bike for the 21st century. And the marketing people really understood that one. They wanted that to go on, and we did several prototypes and spent a lot of money on it. Visited a lot of big companies in Europe looking at processes and moulding and everything. And took bikes to shows and showed them to the Dutch public, and they just really appreciated the product. And again, curiously, the Dutch punter, the Dutch cyclist, had no problem with monoblades. They didn't even notice that. Eddie would say, "Well, which side looks nicest? Oh, is there a difference?" And you have to show them how to. Oh, yeah, that's a nice idea. You mend the puncture easily, whatever. So whereas the Giant mountain bike team, when I turned up at training camp on Lanzarote with a monoblade on the bike, they wouldn't sit on it. They wouldn't even ride down the mountain on it, sort of thing, because it looked a bit weird. But non-cyclists, no, have no trouble with it at all. But we couldn't get any other manufacturer to come on board with Giant and make the special components. Just nothing. I mean, this is Giant, the world's biggest bike maker, for Christ's sake. They're going to spend a fortune with you. Can you make us some special kits? We couldn't even get Supertape to make a decent dynamo for us, whatever. No, it's stupid. And so this is it. Globally, the bike trade is conservative. It's backward. It can't do anything new. It's just been doing the same thing for 100 years, and it's just lost the idea of design, whatever. So I think it was terrible, sad. And again, all of that, the frustration, I couldn't cope with it. I was getting nowhere, whatever. It was nice to people in Giant. Well, we've got on wonderfully within Giant. They were great guys, and they wanted to build that bike, so they were more than happy. But Giant don't make components; they just make the frame, and they get no cooperation. They're on a hiding to nothing sort of thing, whatever. So that never got done. The folding bike halfway, that was reasonably successful, and again, that wasn't quite what it should have been. The committee got their hands on that one and messed it up a little bit, I'm afraid. Sort of thing, but no. So that 7 years was great. But after that, the really funny thing was, and I'm sure it's not just my natural arrogance, but I'd assumed that when I quit with Giant at the end of 2000, then the whole world would be beating on my door. I mean, I was the most famous bike designer, obviously. I did 7 years, very successful years with the biggest bike manufacturer in the world. We'd changed the shape of road racing. The Italians were now copying the Taiwanese, as it were. So I think I transformed. No. Nobody, not one person ever approached me to design bicycles. So that tells you, I think, rather more about the industry than my sense of self-importance sort of thing. Because, I'm that successful guy, wouldn't you want to hire me to design you? No, they don't need bike designers. Colour and graphics, pick and mix for the Shimano group set. That's what bike design is. They weren't interested. They just didn't want to make better bicycles. Now, the world is a bit like that anyway, but I've always thought the cycling world ought to be a little bit above that, whatever. It is about efficiency and moderation and nice things. And it's not about the Jeremy Clarkson approach to life, as it was. And I think it's about a much more of a Buddhist approach, whatever. But no. And again, it's partly, I think, and I often cite this, the cycle industry is the opposite of the City of London. The City of London is the biggest problem this country has. It's an incredible talent magnet. So any bright young thing comes out of our top colleges and they want to earn loads of money, because at that age they're bound to think that loads of money is a good thing. Where do you get it? You get it in the city. So they sit there being stressed out, looking at a computer gamble for them, whatever sort of thing, and they're wrecked for the rest of their lives. Whereas the cycle industry doesn't attract any talent. There's nobody wants to go into the bike trade sort of thing, And I saw this happen. Giant UK, who I technically didn't work for, but obviously went out with a lot of events with them. They ended up with a manager who himself had won an Olympic medal in hockey, I think it was, and he took over there, and he was fantastic. He was an achiever. Giant UK never had been up to much. We became the #1 brand. It was the height of mountain bike, and everybody wanted a Giant mountain bike. He just turned the whole thing around. A couple of years and he left. That was it. Nowhere to go. That's it. He'd achieved it. There was no competition as far as he was concerned. There was no. He wasn't going to go and work in Taiwan, whatever. That's it. So, and that's the bike trade. There is, the reason I'm the best is because I've got no competition. So, other than the laid-back world's another matter, but I move into the laid-back world. I tell people I do very little telling and a lot of asking, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But mainstream cycling, no, there's no talent at all. It's just, there's no reason for it to go there, and it's just this inward-looking sort of regressive area, whatever sort of thing. And it's a great shame, because the bicycle is there to save the planet. It really can. It's got a great history and potentially even greater future, whatever. So if you could people understand it. And what I saw with Giant was the influence of cycling at that level on the pavement, on the man on the street.
Yep.
You had this direct trickle down from, and if Chris had carried on riding monocoque bicycles, if the Lotus had gone into production, kids on the street would be on monocoque bikes today. This is it. That they would have influenced the whole of bicycle design. The single-sided thing, the chain case, all of that would have been a natural follow-on from that. But because it got banned by the governing bodies, didn't go anywhere. And again, it's incredibly influential. When we signed up the Onthe team, Cinelli were one of the partners. They rode Cinelli components, whatever, and I got to meet Tony Colombo, the boss there, and he was saying the biggest problem for them was when they were banning my bike, they were banning his handlebars as well. There was a little thing called the spin arches, the little clip-in things that went on the top of your drop handlebars. Everybody was riding, and they were really the most commercially successful product they'd ever launched. It was really coining it in for them, whatever, and they were comfortable, they were safe, and they banned them. And he said what amazed him wasn't so much that they stopped selling them because they'd been banned, it was the old boys who were riding along the Côte d'Azur on the Sunday mornings took them off their bikes.
Yep.
Because as comfortable and nice as they were, their heroes no longer used them.
Yep.
That's the influence of racing, and it goes all the way down.
It does, yeah.
So, and again, to me, one of the real nice things would be, and it's never going to happen, would be if something like the prologue in the Tour de France allowed low racing recumbents. Not fully fair, you want to see your heroes, but with the tail fairing in the boot. Now, bearing in mind how fast I go on one of those, the likes of Mr. Froome would really impress people, sort of thing, And you're not in a mass start race, you don't want them there, whatever, but just this little image of something that different, hurtling through the corners with his elbow on the ground, whatever sort of thing, leaned over, sort of thing, would absolutely. Oh, that's not like cycling was when I was a boy. You get that approach, and it gives it credibility the moment people of that stature are riding those alternative bikes. At the moment, no, it's people like me, and I'm a designer, but I'm not a great cyclist, so nobody's going to be impressed. And it's a shame, because it would move things on, but you'd have more choice. At the moment, people don't see it as a choice. I mean, very few bike shops sell laid-back cycles, sadly. And even the ones that do, people they're a bit weird, aren't they? Well, people look at me, well, yeah, they will. They won't run you down. That would be a big advantage.
Yes.
Sort of thing. Being looked at, it's good, sort of thing. No one's ever come close to me on a recumbent. And it's funny, I found out why a few years back. I was coming back from an event up north of Birmingham, I think, Lichfield Way, coming down the dual carriageway, driving back obviously. I thought, what the bloody hell was that? And it was Stuart Dennison riding back to the station on one of my rat races. Oh, that's what I look like. I've never seen me from there before, sort of thing. And it's a low race of a chrysler. How could you miss it? It's the weirdest thing on the road. Sort of. Everybody was giving him a massive mile clearance, sort of thing. Of course they were, sort of thing. So, whereas bicycle, wallpaper. They just don't take any notice of them, sort of thing, sadly, whatever. And again, I get cut up more on the 8 freight than on the low racer. It's strange.
One of the things we were talking about earlier off camera was we've got lots of people who are now beginning to get into cycling because they've seen the success of people like Chris Froome and Bradley Wiggins and Laura Kenny and all those sorts of interesting people. And then some of them are beginning to find the interesting world of laid-back cycles and all of the wonderful things associated with that. What would sort of your advice be to them in terms of maybe a first ride if they're looking to pick up a first ever recumbent?
Well, the ideal thing is to turn up, look up the website, the BHPC's race program, because we're a very friendly lot. Chris Froome's not going to let you jump on his Pinarello, but our lot will mostly let you jump on their bike and try them out, sort of thing. So, and there's everything from my rat racing, which is really quite scary. You wouldn't want to ride whatever. I'm not sure I want to ride it, to be honest. I like winning, so I have to much more accessibly. There's the old King cycle just fly out there, and my rat coaches or whatever. There's a lot of very rideable bikes, and determine what it is you want to do. Do you want to end up in a club and do racing, because we're a very friendly and not that competitive crowd, to be honest with them. The fact that I could win races tells you an awful lot how competitive we are. But if all you want to do is go touring, and again the York Rally, and turn up at the York Rally, you'll see a massive guys on bikes, and what recumbents do really well is do long distances in comfort, whatever sort of thing. Is fascinating. And interestingly, I mentioned this briefly earlier, I doing this speed project with Glenn, and we needed to know how much power I had in my sad little body, and I got tested by a local guy who does this for a living. And on my conventional bike, which I took first just to make sure we could get on his equipment, I was sort of okay for an old man, but not that good for an old cyclist, to be honest, whatever. And I was a little disappointed. Okay, but obviously I must be a very good bike designer. Been racing with this body. But I went back on the recumbent, my training racer, as it were, and suddenly I was good. I had 35% more power in the recumbent position. And is that as a result of 15, 20 years, mostly laying on my back and riding and not racing, at least the uprights at all, whatever. So my muscle development has subtly changed, whatever. But not only comfortable, but I was generating more power. And certainly, they're healthier, they're faster, they're safer. They've got everything going for them. They're less universal. I mean, shopping in town, you can do it, but they're not ideal. It's like riding a mountain bike on a velodrome. You could do it, but why would you, whatever? So basically, but ideally you have a set of bicycles anyway. You have different bikes for different situations, and if you want to do long, comfortable rides, then and they do climb hills. This idea they don't climb. It's the old men who ride them don't climb hills. Bikes don't. Bikes descend. Okay, sort of thing. So, but just look around and the club. There are shops, but there are very few shops obviously who sell them, whatever sort of thing. So the club is probably the nearest event. The club is go and have a look at them, whatever sort of thing. Okay. There's enormous selection there.
Yeah, and I guess my final question would be sort of, obviously you get enormously excited talking about the different laid-back bikes, and what's sort of out there right now, aside from your own personal project. What's really got you imagining exciting things?
Nothing really.
I'll scrap that question.
I don't get out much these days. No, that is not the sad thing. It's the natural thing. But the club, when we were formed in '83, if you wanted to go racing, you either made it yourself or you bought a Speedy, because there was nothing else. These days, most of the bikes that get raced are commercially available bikes. Of course, the number of builders like myself. As a percentage, obviously fewer and fewer, whatever, myself, Miles, one or two others, whatever sort of thing. So, and the commercial stuff is, again, it's settling down. If the Dutch Cyclovision is the big show to go to see what's out there. Yeah. There's a whole range of commercially very, very nice equipment, whatever sort of thing. But obviously, it's not the rubbish of the mainstream cycling world, but it has to obviously be practical on the roads. If it hasn't got the exotic features that my own personal racers are going to have, whatever sort of thing, it's got to be fixed in the bike shop and on the road, if you like, whatever. But bearing that in mind, that's it. There's lots of very nice bikes being made by the Dutch and German manufacturers in this country. We've got I still in Cornwall doing the three-wheelers superbly well and very successfully, whatever sort of thing. And the Speedy's still around there, sort of thing. So there's nice stuff. But it's there. I mean, online, obviously, you can look up anything. But if you want to really try it out, you come to one of our events or Cyclovision in the Netherlands.
Okay. So obviously we've scratched the surface of your life in cycling. If people want to learn more, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Buy my book, all about me and my bicycles.
That's just up here.
Sorry, yes. That's the current one, and of course there's the earlier one, Bicycling Science, that Tony handled on, which is what affects the performance of a bicycle. And again, through the club website, you can get both the books, whatever sort of thing. And it's an accessible book of technology, whatever sort of thing.